Week 9 of the NFL season had many upsets, a big time Bills victory, the MVP odds shifting, but one of the things that shifted were the amount of injuries in the fantasy football landscape, like Jaden Daniels, Tucker Kraft, that ultimately are going to cause fantasy managers to panic. No need to panic, guys. The waiver wire is here and provides the opportunity to improve your fantasy football teams on a weekly basis. While I don't think this is one of the best waiver wire periods of the year, there are definitely some strong plug and play options at each position that you need to know heading into week 10 to improve and work towards that playoff hunt or secure yourself a championship when it's all said and done. So let's get into this video here on Blitz Fantasy Football. What's going on, everybody? My name is Blitzlink, and today we're getting into that waiver wire video. Let's start off with the Jacksonville Jaguars wide receiver, Parker Washington. Now, Travis Hunter being out on IR, we don't really know. 4 to 6 weeks is the estimated timeline. We will see how long it lasts. But Parker Washington was the biggest beneficiary of this. He slotted into that slot position, no pun intended, 8 catches for 90 yards and a 26.4% target share. He recorded a 77% route share and 20% target share before week 9. So it was very encouraging that he continued to do that and trend in the right direction. He's had multiple performances of 8+ targets this year. And one of the things that I'm starting to notice with Trevor Lawrence and his tendencies in this Liam Cohen offense, it is dump me down and get me those invaluable targets in PPR formats. And that is what Parker Washington is really good for. 8 for 90 is no slouch, though, against a Raiders defense that struggles. And with Brian Thomas Jr. suffering an ankle injury, De'Ami Brown also suffering a concussion, their statuses are up in the air going forward. Now, their upcoming matchups for the Jaguars are the Texans and the Chargers, which are tougher tests. But with Brian Thomas Jr.'s volatility this year and a lot of concerns about his availability next week, I think Parker Washington should be in for a nice day in a slot position in Liam Cohen's offense that always tends to produce in fantasy football. He's a solid wide receiver 4. I recommend targeting 8 to 10% fab on him. Should be a solid plug and play over the next couple of weeks. The next guy is Harold Fannin Jr., and I don't understand how this guy is not rostered in over 50% of leagues at this point. Harold Fannin Jr. has had 4 top 12 weekly finishes, has a strong 16.6% target share, and has seen that mark jump up to 19% since Dylan Gabriel took over. He ranks 14th in red zone targets and 7th among tight ends in air yard share, but he only has 2 touchdowns this year, so some positive regressions coming. His underlying metrics also say his expected points per game have him at the tight end 8. He's currently the tight end 12, so a guy that has some positive regression coming off of Cleveland's bye week. They get the New York Jets defense, who has been one of the worst against tight ends. I think it's also interesting that what could happen with David Njoku at the deadline. He's also increased his 11 personnel snaps. Harold Fannin Jr., guys, I don't understand if he is sitting on your waiver wire and you need a tight end, especially you Tucker Kraft owners, secure Harold Fannin Jr. He is a great player the rest of the year. Now, fool's gold here a little bit is Devin Singletary for the New York Giants. Tyrone Tracy Jr. got hurt towards the end of the game, and the snap share was a little bit different. Tracy was actually only operating at 22 out of 40 possible snaps for this backfield, so it's a little bit more of a split than we expected, with Devin Singletary taking a significant amount of snaps on early downs and short yardage work, while Tyrone Tracy Jr. operated on that third down role, which is kind of coveted right now with how effective Cam Skattebo has been in this offense for the New York Giants this year. Now, with Devin Singletary wasn't particularly efficient, had 10 total opportunities and a negative game script, and wound up out snapping Tracy overall, but he is definitely worth taking a note at if Tyrone Tracy Jr.'s injury lingers this week. The upcoming week for the New York Giants are going to get the Chicago Bears, who just gave up 40 points to the Bengals this past week and have allowed the most yards per play this season among every defense in the NFL. So there should be an opportunity for Devin Singletary to provide some flex value potentially this week, depending if everything falls in the right place for him. So he's a name that you need to do. I wouldn't recommend throwing a ton of fab on him. Maybe throw a dollar or two, see if you could snag him on your bench. And best case scenario, Tyrone Tracy's out, and you have a plus matchup against a rough Bears defense. The next guy is another name I don't know how who's sitting there, Troy Franklin, 48% roster. Now he's slowly climbing up that roster percentage. Should be this last week under 50%, but he had a quiet week 9 against the Houston Texans where he only caught 4 passes for 27 yards. But let's not act like he didn't have a good day analytically. 27% target share and finished with 10 targets against an elite Houston Texans stacked secondary. Before that performance against Houston, he had multiple wide receiver one finishes heading into that week 8. He had 18.6% target share on the year now and a 21% first read share. Also, he has climbed up to second in terms of Broncos pass catchers and snaps, routes run. He is the clear number 2 wide receiver behind Cortland Sutton. Now, they get a quick turnaround against the Raiders on Thursday night, who have allowed the 4th most opposing points to wide receivers this year in fantasy football. Then they get the Chiefs, which should be a potential high scoring affair, and the Broncos are going to need to throw the ball, and they should be able to exploit the Chiefs as well. So with Troy Franklin, he's the guy that I feel most confident with plugging and playing in my lineup as a wide receiver 4. He's a player that, like Parker Washington, 10 to 12% of the fab should be targeted to Troy Franklin and making sure you have him in your lineups. The next guy is our first quarterback, and it is MVP candidate Sam Darnold. Wow, if I would have told you that 2 years ago, you would have thought I was a madman, but Sam Darnold is playing out of his mind right now for the Seattle Seahawks on prime time against the Washington Commanders. The guy finished 21 of 24 with 330 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. The performance marked his 4th top 10 fantasy finish of the season, 6 double-digit outing overall, and he's currently only rostered in 50% of ESPN and 42% of Yahoo leagues, despite sitting at 5th in MVP odds. Darnold has been unbelievable, and it's in a large part due to his receiver in Jackson Smith-Njigba taking a massive step forward as potentially one of the league's best. What Darnold has been most impressive with is that his floor is relatively high on a weekly basis. 200 yards and 2 touchdowns is basically what Darnold has been doing, and he gets Arizona only 15.1 fantasy points allowed to the quarterback position per game this year. I feel confident going in. If you're a Jaden Daniels owner who's missing him for the rest of the season, Sam Darnold is the perfect long-term option to replace him. He's been red hot, and so have the Seattle Seahawks overall. Make sure you get him. Another quarterback to take a look at is Joe Flacco, who has an absurd amount of weekly passes. 40.9 pass attempts is the overall number that he's sitting at. That is insane for a guy of his age throwing that much, but that is what is needed when you have the worst defense in the NFL in the Cincinnati Bengals. And Joe Flacco has been able to take advantage of that in fantasy football. In week 9 against the Chicago Bears, he threw for 470 yards and 4 touchdowns, resulting in a 30-point outing. Since taking over as a starter in week 6, Flacco has averaged 25.5 fantasy points per game and topped 18 points in every single outing. This guy has been so good. He is a vet that knows how to take advantage of having Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, making both of them very good. And he also has the 3rd easiest remaining schedule at the quarterback position. You miss out on Sam Darnold, he's not available. Joe Flacco is a guy you need to take a look at and find a way to potentially snag on that waiver wire. The guy that he played against is another tight end I'm looking at, though, Colston Loveland, who finally had that breakout game. The rookie who was picked 10th overall, slowly increasing his snap share throughout the year, but it took Cole Kmet's injury for him to have these monster performances, and obviously a great matchup against the lifeless Cincinnati Bengals on the defensive side of the ball. Loveland caught 6 passes for 118 yards and 2 touchdowns, most notably having that massive game winner at the end of regulation. His 29-point performance is the most among all rookie tight ends this year, so it is incredibly encouraging that Loveland is starting to hit his stride in the middle of the season. We know that Ben Johnson thought very highly of Loveland coming out, picking him over Tyler Warren, who's a bit more accomplished coming out of college. And, if it's this Cole Kmet injury that allows him to play more snaps, so be it. He has had great usage over the last 2 weeks with Kmet out, operating at over 80% of snaps, 79% of routes on pass attempts, and he is an immediate tight end 1 streaming option next week against the New York Giants if Cole Kmet were to miss any time with this concussion. I think that as far as a long-term effect with Colston Loveland, he's only going to get better as the season goes on. I truly think that Chicago invested this capital in him, and he is a high upside stash the rest of the year. And if Kmet's out, he has weekly viability to get in your starting lineup. The next guy is Alec Pierce, who's been a little bit underrated, and a guy that's only owned in 29% of leagues, has 500 receiving yards in the year. That's pretty impressive considering the fact he's unowned in a lot of leagues right now. This past week, he had 6 catches for 115 yards against the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's the team's ex-receiver and has had an impressive 20.4 yards of average depth of target, which is double over every other Indianapolis wide receiver this year. The crazy part about him is he's averaging right around 10 fantasy points per game, and he's yet to catch a touchdown this year. There is positive regression coming with Alec Pierce, and I know his role is very reliant on him getting down the field targets, but with the way Indianapolis is playing, you have to account for Jonathan Taylor in the run game. You got to account for Tyler Warren and Michael Pittman over the middle of the field in the passing game. Pierce has had some favorable looks, and now he gets some secondaries, including Atlanta and Tennessee, who have ranked bottom 10 in explosive pass over expected over the last 3 weeks. So with Alec Pierce, I think he is a solid wide receiver 4. I don't think he's as valuable as Troy Franklin and Parker Washington this week, but he's definitely worth taking a look at on the waiver wire. Let's clump two guys together here that could impact fantasy waivers and this week in general. Dylan Sampson's the first one, only owned in 13% of leagues. Quinshon Judkins left early in week 8, and we don't know his official status just yet heading into week 10, but Sampson would be the primary beneficiary if Judkins was out, playing 19 of 27 final snaps before Judkins is able to return. And what's interesting about it is Sampson was very viable in a pass catching role earlier to start the season. So I like him against the New York Jets, who have really struggled against running backs if Judkins is out. The other guy is Tank Bigsby for the Philadelphia Eagles, that once Saquon Barkley was hurt, he logged 9 carries for 104 yards once he left, playing 13 of 16 possible snaps. He is these Eagles stash that you definitely want to have if Barkley is not able to go this week against the Green Bay Packers. I know the Packers are a tough matchup. I faded Rico Dowdle this week, but Dowdle, 130 yards. We know the talent the Eagles have on the offensive side of the ball. Should be in for a nice week. With both of those guys, obviously you have until Tuesday night to make a decision on what's going to happen. And unfortunately, we don't get those schedules to Wednesday, so they are worth a speculative stash. If I were to stash one, I'd likely go with Dylan Sampson, considering the matchup favorable over Tank Bigsby. As far as my favorite defense of the week, the Buffalo Bills, who just dominated the Kansas City Chiefs, have one of the more underrated pass rushes in football. They've racked up 10 sacks over the last 2 weeks, and they've just been really good overall this year. 4 interceptions, 5 fumble recoveries, 20.9 points per game allowed. And then they get a division rival in the Miami Dolphins, who have been unraveling on the offensive side of the ball. Tua has thrown 7 interceptions in his last 4 games, and they just mustered 6 points against the Ravens the week before. Despite moving the ball pretty well, they turned the ball over a ton, and it's a very advantageous matchup for fantasy football defenses. Let's get into the honorable mentions this week, and we'll start with Aaron Rodgers, who has been a steady quarterback and a good plug-and-play option for a lot of teams going forward. 200 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's what Rodgers is good for. Isaiah Davis is a name to watch if Breece Hall gets traded. He would be the biggest beneficiary to that, so he's a name that Monday night, make sure you're trying to stash if possible. If not, Tuesday, it might be too late, depending on the trade and what happens. Bashal Tootin and Kenneth Gainwell both have some value. As far as wide receivers go, Christian Watson, Torrey Horton, Tez Johnson are, some receivers I'd take a look at. Tez is the one that has been very impressive as of late. Good target share for Tampa Bay. Then tight ends, you got Cade Otton, Dalton Schultz, Theo Johnson. Theo Johnson's an interesting one. Good target share this past week. Caught another touchdown. Seems to continuously find his way in the end zone. Another defense I do like this week is the Cleveland Browns against the New York Jets. And then kickers, you have Jason Myers and Cairo Santos, who have had really productive years so far. Droppable players, Brashard Smith for the Kansas City Chiefs. Pacheco will return off their bye week in week 10, and he just is not seeing a significant amount of usage for him to be rostered. Keon Coleman, Matthew Golden, just not big enough roles in their offenses. And then Evan Ingram, just not a big enough role and limited snap share. And then our guy, Tucker Kraft, RIP, fantasy midseason award for the tight end position. Unfortunately, he is a droppable player with his torn ACL. And the guys you don't want to drop yet, Jordan Love, I know he had a stinker against the Carolina Panthers, but he's been a very inconsistent quarterback. And with Jaden Daniels' injury, there could be some teams that overpay for him. Alvin Kamara, maybe he gets traded, right? But I think there are better days ahead for him. He's been really bad. Chuba Hubbard, let's see if Rico Dowdle's snap share holds another week. Jacoby Myers, maybe he gets traded. Maybe he doesn't. I don't know. I expect better days ahead for him potentially. And then Zach Ertz, we'll see what happens with Marcus Mariota at quarterback. But all in all, though, guys, that is our Week 10 waiver wire guide. It's not the most attractive waiver wire of the year, but there's definitely some options that you can plug and play in your lineup and have some success. Drop a comment down below if you need any sort of waiver wire advice. Hit that subscribe button for more Blitz fantasy football content, and I'll catch you guys next time.